Social media has been blowing up, with many discussing the controversy surrounding the Jasper wildfires. Firefighters, along with their fire trucks, were allegedly turned away back in July, just 3 days after the fires broke out. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Sun political columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, why on earth would firefighters be turned away from such a devastating wildfire?
Well, Parks Canada is the one in charge, and you heard it from Deputy Premier Ellis as well. They were making all the decisions, and they had a command and control structure that excluded anyone outside. So they worked with the town of Jasper, but they didn't work with the province. And this company that showed up was 20 private fire trucks, a company called Arctic Fire Services. They do firefighting in northern Canada. They are contracted to do it. They're equipped. They're qualified. They could have gone in to help, but they were turned away. That was coming out at a Commons committee on Monday, along with the testimony from Deputy Premier Ellis, basically denouncing how the federal government was operating. And it is angering not only people in Alberta, but in Ottawa. It's taken on a life of its own. The committee's been trying to get to the bottom of the Jasper wildfire for some time now. And of course, as we've discussed before, those reports going back to 2018 and earlier about the dead tree stands, and that this was timber that was just waiting there, that there was going to be a disaster. The government was warned. Unfortunately, it appears Parks Canada has adopted the same failed strategy that's been used in California. We keep hearing, well, there's more wildfires due to climate change. Well, perhaps wildfires have always been with us. And what is also driving wildfires is the lack of preparation, the lack of controlled burns, the lack of forest management. Forest management practices were put into place to deal with wildfires, which are natural. There has been a move to back away from that and just leave things as they were naturally. Well, that results in more forest fires. So the minister has been grilled about the dead tree stands. He told the MPs on the committee, some of whom were from Alberta and affected by this, that, oh, well, you just don't understand how things work. Stephen Guilbeault's been very arrogant on this. The whole federal government has been very arrogant on this. But I still think that they have a lot of questions to answer for.
Brian, is Stephen Guilbeault's job on the line here as Environment Minister?
Probably not, because Justin Trudeau is enamored with Stephen Guilbeault. This is a guy who I thought was going to be removed from this file a year or so ago. He was picking fights with every premier across the country. He was causing problems. His signature legislation, of course, has been rejected by the Supreme Court. He's still pushing ahead with that. He is a zealot. He is a green zealot, and Justin Trudeau really admires that about him. So I don't think Stephen Guilbeault is going anywhere. He is seen as doing the right thing. And when it comes to the Jasper wildfires, just like in Toronto, we had a big flood a little while ago, and all that the progressives want to do is say, oh, climate change, but not do anything about it. Our mayor and our city have not put in flood mitigation measures because they just say climate change. It's like a get out of jail free card. That's all Guilbeault wants to do on this. Claim it's climate change, turn around and say, and see, this is what will happen if you elect conservatives. You'll get more of this because they're climate deniers.
Brian, chants of death to Canada were heard at various pro-Palestinian and anti-Semitic rallies across the country. Now, you experienced some of this firsthand at a protest in Toronto over the weekend. Why isn't more being done to quash these vile rallies and arrest people?
Well, those are some of the questions I put to Toronto's police chief when he held a news conference last week. He had a few uncomfortable moments with me grilling him. We've had rallies every week in Toronto. Same in Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary. But Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver tend to be the really bad hotspots. And I think there's a lack of political will. Last week, when I was at this news conference with the chief, they said they'd have arrested and charged 72 people over the course of the year. And then they arrested 2 more the day after for flying the Hezbollah flag. Hezbollah is a banned terrorist entity. There better be charges coming out of what we saw in Vancouver. I pointed to disgusting chants at the rally in Toronto. I posted the video as evidence. People are clearly supporting terrorist groups, but their words aren't direct. They're saying things like, we don't want two states, take us back to 48, meaning before Israel existed as a recognized state by the UN. They want to do away with Israel. They believe that they should control all the land. They scream out, long live the resistance, and things like that. But you can make arguments and play word games and say, well, oh no, it doesn't mean that. I meant this. When you are chanting, as they did in Vancouver on Monday night, we are Hezbollah, we are Hamas, our resistance has lived forever. Death to Canada, death to the United States, death to Israel. At that point, you are publicly expressing your support, undoubtedly, for a terrorist entity, a terrorist organization, and you are inciting people to violence. If you are not on board with where I am on this issue, how then, or your viewers aren't, then let these videos of people chanting this wake you up. They don't just hate Israel. They don't just hate Jews. The people going to these marches want to fundamentally change Western civilization because they do not support Western civilization. And they make that clear with their statements over and over again, whether it's the chants in Vancouver, the violence in Montreal, or the rhetoric here in Toronto.
How about maybe freezing some bank accounts? Maybe that'll open some eyes too. I think that was tried before once.
Brian,
Brian,
only if they bring out a hot tub or bouncy castles.
oh my word. Brian, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is now calling on the Trudeau government to denounce these chants we were just chatting about. What was the federal government's response?
He asked Melanie Joly twice yesterday to denounce them. She stood up to answer the first time and gave a statement, and it wasn't a bad statement on the anniversary of October 7th, but she did not denounce the chant. She didn't even reference the chant. Poilievre got up and asked again. This time it was Justice Minister Virani who got up and answered, and he talked about the need to be against anti-Semitism and all forms of hate, but would not denounce the chants. Poilievre asked again and implied that the Minister Joly was not denouncing the chants because of her future Liberal leadership bid. She denounced him as playing politics with the anniversary of October 7th. She went out into the foyer to the scrums afterwards and told reporters that this is proof that he's not fit to be prime minister. How dare he say this? How? I have talked to Liberals who, some of them have given me interviews on the record, in the podcast and elsewhere. They're worried about Melanie Joly and the direction that she is taking Canada and the Liberal Party when it comes to this issue. And it is openly discussed in Liberal circles that there is a concern that Melanie Joly wants to win the Liberal leadership when Trudeau steps down by running on this position of taking the side of Hamas and the Palestinian people against Israel in a future leadership bid. That's being talked about everywhere. In Ottawa, in Toronto, across the country, you talk to Liberals, they will discuss this. So she's being quite precious. But I have to tell you, CBC, on the national, CBC described the chants that Poilievre read into the record as pro-Palestinian. They didn't play the clip. They didn't say what the chants were. She just described them as, he asked her to denounce pro-Palestinian chants. They were not.
Now, speaking of Pierre Poilievre, he's now calling for an organization central to these marches and protests we've seen across Canada to be labeled a terrorist entity, Brian. What's the reasoning behind the chants of death to Canada that you've seen?
Well, so it goes beyond the chance of death to Canada. The organization is called Samidoun. They are headquartered in Vancouver. They were the people behind the rally, and they've been behind many rallies in Vancouver over the last year. Their leader is a woman named Charlotte Kate. She's an American living in Canada. Her husband has ties to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. They run seminars on how to support Palestinian prisoners in Israel's jails. The people that she gives seminars on how to support are all terrorists. There's no question. It's not somebody who stole a loaf of bread or threw a rock. No, they're members of terrorist groups, and they're open about that. Samidoun is banned in Germany and elsewhere. It should be added to the list of terror groups here. for the reasons that I just mentioned, constantly advocating. They've engaged in October 7th denialism, where they say, oh, the rapes didn't happen in Israel. They killed their own people, and things like that. And this is a group that's regularly holding these rallies in Vancouver. And when they chanted "Death to Canada" last night, if you watch the video, it's incredible. People cheered. They cheered wildly when that was said. It's unbelievable that that's there. They've also been central. I don't know about Montreal, but they have been central to the protests here in Toronto, and they show with their banner that has an AK-47 painted like it's the Palestinian flag with bullets coming out of the end. These haven't been peaceful protests from the beginning, not the ones I've been to. And a group like Samidoun, if they're involved, it's not a peaceful protest. It's a call to violence.
The Liberals won 2 confidence votes, but for the past week, Brian, they've not really been in control of the agenda in the House of Commons. What's happening on the Hill right now?
They are discussing a question of privilege. And what's that? Sounds kind of boring. It can be. They've been debating this issue of privilege for the last week. It all comes back to the Green Slush Fund and the fact that back in June, the opposition parties passed a motion calling on the government to hand over the documents related to the $1 billion Green Slush Fund and concerns about $400 million in spending and how it went awry. And this all came about after an audit from the Auditor General found that conflict of interest was rife within the organization. The audit was so bad, the government shut the organization down and transferred the money over to the National Research Council. So they were ordered to hand over the documents to the law clerk, and that the law clerk would then hand over the documents to the RCMP to aid in any police investigation. They did not direct the police on what to do. They just wanted the police to have the full unredacted documents, not even making them public, just hand it over to them. The government refused. Some documents were not given, others were heavily censored, and so they took that issue to the Speaker. And on September 26th, the Speaker ruled. They did not comply. Now, Greg Fergus encouraged all the parties to come together and work to find a solution. They didn't do that, and so they are debating the question of privilege. When privilege has been breached, that is the business of the House, and no government business can move forward. So right now, the government, since last Wednesday after question period happens, committees can table reports. You can have a vote on a committee report and accepting it, but no government business can move forward. So they can't even move forward their Ways and Means motion to increase the capital gains tax. They're being prevented from doing that. And there's no end in sight to this, because as soon as they're done with this question of privilege, then they go to the other question of privilege, and that'll take several days of debate. It's on Randy Boissonnault, the Minister of Employment, and, well, the other Randy. Remember the texts of Boissonnault discussing business with his business partner while at a cabinet retreat. Oh, no, that wasn't Randy Boissonnault. That was the other Randy, but there is no other Randy. So Boissonnault is under, in trouble over this, and they're going to debate that, and that'll take days. So, yeah, they won the confidence votes, but they can't do anything. Clearly, though, the Prime Minister isn't concerned with his government toppling, because he's just flown off to Laos for another international summit.
But Brian, Yves Francois Blanchette, the Bloc leader, wasn't impressed with the Liberals shooting down the private members' bill of an increase of 10% on the OAS payments, the old age security payments for our seniors. So will Blanchette and a separatist party actually bring down the Liberals? Will we see another non-confidence vote, but this time led by the Bloc?
Possibly. But so what happened there is the Bloc wants a private members' bill to receive royal recommendation. You can put forward a private members' bill, but if it requires spending money, even if it passes, it doesn't go anywhere. You need to have the government move anything that would spend money. And of course, Blanchette and the Bloc want the old age security payments for seniors aged 65 to 74 to be increased 10%, just the way it was for those 75 and over. So the Bloc put forward a motion on this. The NDP backed it. The Conservatives backed it, but the Liberals didn't. And so that's not a confidence motion, but it doesn't go forward because the government won't give it that royal recommendation. Therefore, nothing can happen. Blanchette says his party will look at taking support away by the end of October if something doesn't happen, if they don't get their way. But I don't think that Jagmeet Singh would turn on the Liberals. I think he would still be in the corner, putting up his hand, saying, "Hey, me too, boys, me too. Don't forget about me. I'm over here." You've got to get all three opposition parties voting against the government to bring them down. And maybe this dysfunctional nature of Parliament may lead to something eventually. It may change the mind of the NDP. But as we discussed last week, the NDP, they broke. They got no money.
Sun political columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you.